Hi y'all, and welcome back to the garden, and I hope you're ready for lots of blooms but also lots of weeds and a lack of mulch. The garden is not to my standards that I hold for myself for my own garden. I have been gone for a whole week and I came back to a heat wave, which a lot of you are probably experiencing. So we're going to show you what the garden's looking like. Drip irrigation seems to have been very effective while I was away, and it's doing a really good job at maintaining these plants since we've had the heat wave the past couple days, which will continue into the next probably 5 days. The crabgrass is pretty out of control right now. I'm just gonna let it grow on for the week, and then I'm gonna start pulling it after I get some mulch in. I don't wanna start pulling weeds before I have mulch in, because if I do and I don't have more mulch, they'll just come in. So the level of weeds in this bed is something I don't necessarily think is unexpected. This is a brand new garden bed. We have much more open exposed property here than I did at my last garden. And so some high winds have come through as well over the fall and probably blown lots of weed seeds into this garden bed. But what's left in this bed and what's growing most quickly right now is crabgrass, which should be pretty easy to pull up amongst the other plants. And I need to get on that quickly because it's probably just sucking up energy from the rest of the plants. But you can probably see behind me here all the beautiful blooms we've got going on. This right here is the container, and it doubled in size while I was gone. Let's turn the camera around and look at some things. So this is the large lilac blue verbena, snow princess alyssum, and a single truffula pink gomphrena. So you can see how big that single gomphrena has gotten when given lots of water and love, plenty of sunlight. The snow princess alyssum is starting to almost get crowded out. I do like how they've intermingled here. Let's go around to the front here. You can see it hanging out a little better. But I love this color verbena. I feel like as long as Proven Winners makes it, I'm gonna have it in my garden because it's absolutely stunning. Like this perfectly lilac color. And if we turn the camera around, I did plant some of those in the ground here. They were looking a little rough. I didn't get them in the ground in time, and I need to come through and actually pin down the drip irrigation. You can see it's bent up where it's gotten a little warm and stretched out a little bit, and the verbena's all planted right here. So this should be a big mound of that in a few weeks too, hopefully, as it starts coming into bloom, which is just starting now. We're starting to get some blooms on some of the hydrangeas. This is Let's Dance Can Do. All of the buds died off over winter, so this just started blooming. So we're in the mid to late June mark. So what's today? The 19th. So although these completely died back, almost some of them in winter, these buds were formed this year because these bloom on new wood. So this is a good variety in colder zones if you are in colder zones. We'll take a little peek behind there, and you may notice the Senorita Rosalita Cleome, which is a sterile Cleome by Proven Winners. Look how big these have gotten. They've been in the ground for like a month, maybe 5 to 6 weeks at most, but most likely closer to a month. And they're already easily 2 foot by 2 foot, so they're growing really good in the ground. They have been on drip irrigation for about 2 weeks now, 2.5 weeks. So I got drip to most of this bed, and they're doing really good. So lots of blooms, continually pushing out blooms. And Cleomes, if you have grown them before, you know they will reseed prolifically, but this is a nice sterile variety that shouldn't do that, so I won't have to worry about pulling those up as weeds everywhere later this summer or next year. While I was gone, I had a mole come through also this garden bed and just like decimated. I've not noticed any plant damage specifically, but you can see the heel here come through the bed and pushed up a lot of plants. So I'm hoping they make it through the heat okay. Well, you can see this weed did not, which is perfectly fine. Thank you, Mr. Mole. But I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to do about the mole. Went through nearly the entire flower bed around the edge of the sidewalk. I noticed some soil being pushed up, so I haven't noticed any new ones in the past couple days, so maybe he's moved on, but we'll just have to see. You can see these coneflowers came completely into bloom while I was gone, and they are looking stunning. Just a single bloom right now, but these grow really quickly. when they're getting enough sun and heat. And you can see they're performing really well. And this is more what the bloom should look like. You can see this little bee on here. It's already pushing a second bloom. This one's pushing 2 more buds. And this should just be, hopefully, a mass of yellow blooms by the end of the summer. They grow that quickly. If they're not this summer, they certainly will be next spring. Got the Veronicas pushing up down here at the bottom. These were smaller bare roots than I had expected, but they gave me twice as many. So these are going to be tiny this year, and they're probably not going to do a whole lot. The Gomphrena has come back with a vengeance. The truffula pink that I planted in here that was severely damaged by the rabbits. No more chewing, it looks like, so they're starting to rebloom. The sun patience are also blooming pretty well right now and putting on a lot of growth, so I expect a whole lot more out of them this season. And then we have the firefly pink sky yarrow and lots of weeds, so many weeds to deal with. That is looking pretty good, and you can see that color here on what those look like. So it's a very orange. It kind of comes out a little red, which I don't love quite as much right here, but then it fades to like a lighter orange. And I don't know if orange is the correct term for this. It's a yellow center and has a somewhat pink petal on each of the little flowers, but when you combine those two together from a distance, it looks very peach, but I really like it. It's a beautiful performer for those of us who have drier conditions and you're not giving it a whole lot of water and doesn't need a whole lot of fertilization to the soil. I really like how these Fire Chief arborvitae are combining into the garden with their naturally orangey color on their new growth, doing really good and putting on probably 6 inches of growth already in some parts this season. We've got the dark side of the moon astilbe that are about to start blooming. What I really love about this astilbe is the leaves are a really dark purplish red color, similar to this Crimson Century maple that's right here. But the blooms are this most beautiful purple color when they come out. So stay tuned for the next video, and I will make sure I get them in that video so you can see them if you've not grown them before, because they're really stunning. And then you can either cut them off, or I like to leave them around because they provide just upright structure in parts of the garden where you might need it. This is an El Niño Chitalpa, which is a new species released by Proven Winners. I was really concerned about this plant. I planted it last fall, and I wasn't sure that it made it, and it's just kind of been hanging around and not doing anything. Well, with this heat spell we've had the last week, it has exploded. So this is called a desert orchid, and for good reason, because it's loving the heat. These put on very orchid looking flowers, and Chitalpa is a combination between 2 different varieties of plants, but it's a new one that Proven Winners is really excited about and that I'm excited to have here in the garden. It will get pretty big, so I planted some annuals around it this year. I've got some dahlias down here, the Illusion, I think they're called Midnight Illusion or something is the variety name. And then of course the 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗢, but in subsequent years this is going to get pretty big and fill this space, so it'll look really nice. You can see that crabgrass is basically being a mulch for me in some areas of the bed, and is very thick, so I've got to get on it. But the Ever After Veronicas are looking really good. They're starting to go out of bloom in some cases, and some of the ones that I planted from bare root are just coming into bloom, and they look like, you know, pretty good sized plants here. So we come along the Heuchera River. I think this has been a testament to how well these Heuchera do in full sun. If there was going to be a test for these, it would be right now. Look how stunning these things look in a heat wave, and how much growth they put on over the last week, or since I showed you in the video that they were last in. Of course, lots of crabgrass in here too that got to be dealt with, but I just think this turned out really stunning. A lot of the varieties are starting to bloom as well, so you can see, like, from a plug, this plant is already big enough that you would probably see in a container in the garden center. A lot of these are. And I've told you once, I've told you multiple times, I'm really blown away by the breeding that has gone into these varieties. My drift of 𝗣𝗥𝗢𝗡𝗢 phlox is starting to come up. I don't have drift on all of the phlox. I may need to add a little bit. Since it's been so dry, I probably need to just come through and overhead water a bit of it, because some of the ones that do not have drip right here are a little dry, and I can probably just add a loop from here to there without impacting flow too much. That's only 6 feet or so, so a few gallons an hour, and get some growth push to these ones right here that don't have so much drip going on to them. I'm gonna get blooms out of the Serendipity Alliums, which I was not expecting their first year, so those are growing like weeds too, along with everything else. So taking a step back and looking at this space, I can tell now that things are growing in well where I might need to tuck some things next year, but there's still stuff that have a pretty good area to fill in. So as I mentioned, I need to replace this Japanese maple that died. Don't know what I'm going to replace that with right now. Probably a smaller-ish shrub that will look good in that location. Still thinking about ideas there. Got lots of the Supertunia Vista bubblegum that is starting to fill out really nicely down here at the bottom. And then we have this more of the Snow Princess Alyssum, which is just literally carpeting the ground right now. I need to come through and deadhead my roses, but it's not slowing them down. This is honey apricot, and you can see how many blooms are on this waiting to rebloom, and it's only June, and this just finished blooming like several weeks ago. My campfire marshmallow bidens is starting to rebloom. I was afraid I was going to lose them because they looked really bad in the containers when I planted them, because I'd been giving them too much water and not enough sun until I could get them planted. But they're starting to rebloom and putting on lots of more buds, so I think those are going to start filling out nicely now. I need to come through and cut back my dianthus because those are looking rough in the sun there now that the blooms have all faded out and dried up. The butterfly, yellow butterfly, let's see what the name of this is. Golden butterfly marguerite daisies are starting to put on a ton of growth. And shout out to this midnight sun 𝗍𝗟𝗓𝗏, which is taking on a crazy amount of red color here in this bright sun that it's getting. I love this 𝗍𝗟𝗓𝗏. Not like super showy blooms. It does have blooms, but you buy it for the foliage because it comes out green. You can see a lot of that more shaded leaves down there, but this is like really striking plant in the full sun. As we come through here, lots more things blooming. We've got the violet profusion salvias down here that are covered with pollinators. Lots of weeds still to deal with. The Peter Cottontail yarrow has completely bloomed out, and this is a good cut flower for like a baby's breath alternative. Like, look how darling those little blooms are there. And then as we come this way, things are looking pretty good as well. We've got the Bloomerang lilac, which is blooming for a second time already in June and smells really good. This is a new variety this year called Purpink. So it's not quite purple, not quite pink. So they smashed those two words together and called it Purpink. The automatic fountain refilling has worked flawlessly. It's refilling 10 minutes for 3 times a day, which is probably not necessarily needed that period of time, but that gives it enough time to fill up at that really slow rate it's going. And as we pan this way, you can see what's going on in these beds here. More weeds, and then this wee bit innocent hydrangea is actually surviving the sun pretty well, but it is getting a pretty good amount of water. There's quite a few drippers there around it. Don't know necessarily how many gallons per hour. It wilts a little bit before the drip comes on, and I have this one coming on about 3 o'clock. So right there in the really hot part of the day where it's been in the sun all day, and it's holding its own. There's been no burning, and it was just planted 2 weeks ago or so. So doing pretty good with enough water. Starting to get buds on Let's Dance Lovable that I planted here, which is really exciting from these tiny plants, so that will be any day. Got a little dog vomit mold growing on the good mulch that was put down last year, and then some pufferfish hydrangeas that are coming into bloom as well. So pufferfish is unique because it doesn't, or it's not really supposed to turn as pink as some paniculata hydrangeas do. So if you want a hydrangea that stays a little more white, the panicles continue to expand, and then at the very end it jets out a little tiny panicle that looks like a little puff of smoke, so that's why they called it pufferfish. My snowflake hydrangea looks like it's getting a little burnt. Not terrible, so I might need to up the irrigation in this area. I've only been doing 30 minutes for these beds, this side of the sidewalk here, because there's not a whole lot in these beds, and a lot of the things that were here were already pretty established other than a few perennials and a couple shrubs. But this could probably use a little more up here against the brick wall, so we'll see about adjusting that. Or instead of adjusting the time, I can simply pop another emitter in there, which might be what I do because everything else seems to be pretty happy, and that way it's getting a little more water, but we're not watering anything else more. Need to cut the grass, but we have cool season grass in Southwest Ohio. We're kind of in a transition zone, so you can kind of sometimes grow some warm season grasses, but a lot of people around here grow cool season, which means the grass will go dormant when it gets the hottest in the summer. And because it doesn't like the heat, cutting it when it's so hot outside is not great for it and will cause it to definitely go dormant and turn brown. So been leaving the grass a little longer this week to help prevent some loss of moisture. But I want you to check out this shade bed because it's looking pretty good. We've got a lot of different things in here, some hydrangeas that are new and interesting, including this Tuff Stuff Top Fun, which is blooming a little slower. It was planted last year, but it is a mountain hydrangea, Hydrangea serrata. There's the name of it right there. But it is coming along. So it's a smaller one, but it's supposed to have even hardier blooms. The Tuff Stuff series is known for their hardy blooms, and it is coming back and blooming pretty early for me. Now, one that I want to show you that I just showed you up front is Let's Dance Lovable, and I planted it over here last year as well. And I want to show you this bloom because I don't know that I've ever seen a hydrangea bloom that is this vividly pink. Oh, another white spider. Someone pointed that out in the last video. Lots of them around here, right in there. Usually there's more of like a paintbrush effect on some of the blooms where they're like maybe a little darker or lighter in the middle and then darker or lighter on the edges. And this one's like a pure solid pink. It's aging a little bit and it's been so hot this week, but like it's so vivid. This is Let's Dance Lovable, one of my new favorite varieties for its reblooming ability here in Southwest Ohio. This one did lose almost all of its upper growth. You can see where I trimmed it, so all of this is new buds for this year pretty much, and it will continue to bloom. It bloomed this early and it'll continue to bloom throughout the season and produce buds, and it was producing buds even after a frost last year. So we're going to continue keeping an eye on these macrophyllas or hybrids that are blooming really well for us in Southwest Ohio where it can get pretty cold in the winter, so we can have beautiful pink and blue blooms here too. Now, besides the long grass, let's take a look at these containers because I think this is a testament to Crescent Gardens containers and how well they work in a heat wave like this. So I water them for the first time since I set them in their positions on Monday evening. That means they at least went 3 weeks. Some of them were not ready for water. The smaller ones were. The bigger ones could have spent a little bit more time without having to been watered. But because we were going through this heat wave, I wanted to make sure they received enough water and support, the plants did, that I wasn't like testing their ability to withstand the heat with low water levels. So you can tell these have had zero water-soluble fertilizer, just the 𝗍𝗛𝗡 at planting. Although I intended to put water-soluble fertilizer in here, I am not the best at remembering to do that when I have a lot of other stuff to do. So this is pure 𝗍𝗛𝗡 and the power of 𝗍𝗛𝗡. Now these right here, I'm also loving how they are exploding in growth too, and I think it's a really beautiful combination. There was probably no need to plant this Dichondra Silver Falls down here because it is quickly being taken over by the Supertunia Vista bubblegum and these lime heart sweet potato vines. The grasses will start showing more as it continues to be warm. Like they put on a lot of growth this week. Grasses, anytime I've ever stuck them in a container, they take their sweet little time till they get rooted in well, and then they just explode. So I imagine as quickly as it's grown the past few days that in the next 4 weeks, it will be a really beautiful statement piece in here, and this thing will just be covered and overflowing with blooms and leaves. All right, let's have a little update on the mystery petunias, shall we? So last year I planted Supertunia saffron finch in this container along with Supertunia Vista jazzberry. Now, neither one of those things seem to have come back. And so what that means is I reached out to proven winners and they said their Supertunias are for the most part sterile or most likely sterile. These Supertunia Vista jazzberry is what I'm guessing did set seed in this container and they came back. Now this container's not on drip, it's been left to its own devices. I actually watered it for like the first time when I filled up these containers 2 days ago. So since they grew from seed and their roots are probably really far deep down in this container, they're surviving the heat really well. And there's just some interesting mix of colors in here. So we've got some, this one looks probably closest maybe to jazzberry, but we've got some darker ones, and then we have this really light pink in here. So a lot of random stuff going on, and also some tiny blooms. Like these are tiny blooms for the petunias. A lot of them are smaller. So Supertunia Vista jazzberry does seem to reseed in my opinion. It could also have been saffron finch, but based on the colors these are leaning, I believe it to be jazzberry. And here is the other Crescent garden container looking just as gorgeous and stunning as well as the other one. I had originally planted some hydrangeas on either corner. This was, what's it called? 𝗩𝗥𝗢𝗘𝗢𝗢, I believe. It's the one with the double blooms now. This one did not make it, and that one over there, because it didn't make it, I'm going to transplant it on the back of the house right here. I had prepared that bed before I left with some drip irrigation and some mulch, and I'm going to dig it up after the heat wave and move it so there'll be more available space when I finish edging this bed and extending this. There'll be some more space to walk around and I won't have to worry about anything being planted there and having to groom around it close to the pool. All right, let's look at Limelight Prime, shall we? So this is a new hydrangea to the market within the past couple years, an improvement on Limelight, has stronger stems, earlier bloom time, and more vivid pink color. Now I planted 36 of these in a hedge. They get a little shorter than Limelight. They're estimated to anyway. And they have been growing and potentially doubled in size since I planted them this year. They were 5-gallon containers, so they had a little bit of more roots on them to be able to get established better. The soil here was really fluffy, and I added some 𝗍𝗠𝗦 at planting, but you can see how full these are, and I'm blown away by their growth. Next step for this bed is obviously edging it. I have not been able to get to that yet, and it's so hot this week, but I wanted to start that project as soon as possible. So edging this bed and covering it with mulch, because we're starting to get a little bit of weeds come through the mulch that I put down previously, and I don't want this to get overrun and become an issue. But I am blown away by this hedge so far this year, and I think it's going to look stunning in merely a matter of weeks with how quickly these blooms are progressing. I mean, look how many stems and how many blooms this one hydrangea is going to produce. And that, y'all, is my report during the heat wave. I think things are looking stunning. I can finally see my vision coming to fruition with all of the blooms now that they're settling in. I think this week I'm going to go ahead and order some mulch to have that delivered this weekend, but I'm probably not going to come outside and mulch. I think that's a task I will take on in the evenings after work when it's hopefully a little bit cooler. It is supposed to cool down a little bit next week. I can weed an area, bring in a little bit of mulch, and tackle this period or this bed over maybe like a week, and hopefully it won't be that bad. To get everything covered really nicely so it can certainly settle in for summer as the temperatures do start increasing and we have more consistently warm temperatures. Thank y'all for joining me on this video today to see all the blooms. I'm so excited and loving this season and how it's turning out. And remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.